forgiveness, something that I talk with people a whole lot, since I work with relationships, whether both people come in, the family comes in, or it's just the individual that wants to do their part in healing a relationship or addressing a relationship. These are critical components to it. And I start off often by saying this: we can forgive without reconciling, but we can't reconcile without forgiveness. And that forgiveness, those are kind of two different experiences or aspects or ways of addressing it. First off, the first style of forgiveness, and being Christians, we kind of sort of feel, or we are instructed to forgive others. Now, that forgiveness, and forgiveness is a financial term, right? It's debt or borrowing money, and scenario is I borrow money from you, and I don't pay it back, and you can't necessarily reach me, or if you do, I say I will pay it back, but I don't. And you get frustrated, you get disappointed, you might lose opportunities to use that money someplace else. But eventually you get to the point where you say, fine, I forgive this person, or you forgive me for the debt. And so you mark the books at zero. So my balance owed is zero. And that's understandable. That relieves the person from the burden of this overwhelming or frustrating thing. They can't get your money back. Now, I may hear that you've forgiven my debt, but if I come back, excuse me, to borrow more money, you would be pretty foolish to do so. Why is that? Because I didn't pay back the first loan I had, and so really low probability I'm going to repay this one, right? In the modern terms, we call that credit, but just in relationships, we call that trust, right? And so if I borrowed money and didn't pay it back, I broke trust. In the modern part, might be kind of my credit score would definitely go down if I borrowed money but didn't pay it back. So there's that type of forgiveness. But say there's a forgiveness that is necessary to sort of reconcile a relationship, or to build credit again. And that's a different kind of forgiveness. I have a hard time explaining why it's sort of said differently, but it is kind of a different aspect. And that one is the offending party going to the offended party and asking for forgiveness. Now, that starts off sounding kind of simple, but I think it's pretty complicated. His trust was broken. So let's go back to that borrowing money idea again initially. If I borrowed money and didn't pay it back, right, you're have forgiven me, my debt is zero, but my credit score is terrible. So what would I do? Well, in honoring my irresponsibility and my offense for borrowing the money and not paying it back, I would work to pay that money back. Now, you may have said, oh, you forgive me, and it's zero. I said, yes, but it's my responsibility to pay the loan back, whether you've zeroed out my balance or not. So I work and I pay that back, and maybe I give a little extra for that. And maybe you ask, well, what's that for? And I said, well, it's interest. I recognize that the money I borrowed and didn't pay back kept you from having an opportunity to do something else with the money. And typically, if you borrow money, there's interest associated with it anyway. So there's a risk that the person has for loaning the money, and that risk is rewarded with interest. And then what would I do further as I deal with the money idea? I've paid you back. Now, would you loan me money just after paying it back and paying back a little interest. And it would be kind of unwise to do it that way because I haven't necessarily proven myself that I'm going to actually repay back the money at the terms we agree on. So I would have to do other things in order to build trust. And that might be borrowing smaller amounts of money from other people and paying those things back. And showing myself trustworthy in smaller things would be a way we would build credit score in our modern culture. And in building a credit score, we would earn respect and trust. So after doing that for a long enough period of time, and maybe I even come to you and I borrow some money from you in a smaller amount, and I pay that back. And so, wow, I've built more trust. I've earned more ability for you to risk, more trustworthiness, more responsibility, more greater appearance, however you want to say it. That I am now a responsible person. And then I borrow now a larger sum of money from you, and I follow the terms and I pay it back. Well, that has just increased even more the trust and responsibility. The trust I've gained in you and responsibility I've shown. And that would have fixed really our financial relationship. You take that in parallel with individual relationships, and doing an offense would have broken trust. And we can forgive somebody without ever talking with that person again, right? We can make what they owe us, so to speak, zero, and then we would be free. Wouldn't have that burden of that resentment, bitterness, debt sitting there, or the pain was normally what is experienced in relationships. Now, that's not going to mean we trust the person again, or our relationship goes back to normal, or even if the relationship goes back at all, depending on the level of the offense. So what can be done? So if I'm the offending party, it's the same as if I borrowed money and didn't pay it back. I broke trust. I was irresponsible. I hurt you. So there's actually 5 parts to this idea that I mention to people repeatedly, because I think it's critical to look at all these 5 parts, because when we think about relationships where somebody erred, whether it's in our own or in culture, an esteemed person, pastor, whatever, that we ask for a few things. And the first one is to own it, right? That say, I did it. Not make excuses, not try to bob and weave, not minimize, not reduce it or anything like that, but just flat out own it. I did that wrong thing, that offensive thing. I did that behavior. The second part is to admit it was wrong. If you don't admit it's wrong, you're really kind of making it impact the other person at all. It's kind of the point. If we make an excuse for it, or if we minimize it, oh yeah, I did do it, but then it takes away and sort of rejects the other person's hurt. So it's critical. First one, I did it. Second one, it was wrong. Right. So we want somebody would you own it and admit that it was damaging? All right. Number 3, it hurt you. And not just, oh, it hurt you, but expressing more the details of how did it hurt you? What did it do? And maybe it broke the relationship, obviously, or damaged it in some form or fashion. That maybe it was offensive, maybe it was belittling, maybe it was rejecting, maybe it was demeaning, right? Or some other part, or all of them together, but it hurt you in particular ways. And I need to own and admit and detail that. And I might not get them all initially, but that's where further conversation comes along. But we have to hit those 3 first. I did it, it was wrong, and it hurt you in particular ways. Now, say if you put those 3 together, if you're really thinking about my behavior or your behavior, the wrongness of it, then and that it hurt the other person, you are going to feel sorrow, genuine pain, sadness, right? The I'm sorry makes sense. Often we start with I'm sorry, and often the said is whoop-de-doo, you're sorry. It doesn't make it, the other person doesn't feel any real care or concern by us if we just say sorry. It's often our quickest way to get out of it, really. Sorry, can we move on now? And that's not helpful. And even I apologize isn't necessarily that great. It's still more me. Oh, I apologize. Sorry, we're going to move on. And that doesn't recognize the offense very well either. And, you know, please forgive me. That's better, but not great from my perspective. So the fifth one is the change transfer of power, the given the opportunity of the person to do their part in it. So just to review again, I did it. It was wrong. It hurt you. I'm sorry. And then, will you or would you forgive me for that offense, that behavior, that thing I did? And it has to be would you or will you. It's asking permission of the other person. Can you forgive me? And I joke, I tease a little bit about this, but can you goes back to grade school for me is, can I go to the bathroom when you ask the teacher? And they kind of smart aleck teacher might say, I hope so. Because can is just asking if you have the ability to. It's not asking permission of the other person. And you raise your hand and say, may I go to the bathroom? And then you get the permission from the teacher to go and use the restroom. So can doesn't really work. Please forgive me is sort of halfway there, but it's more of a requirement or request rather than an invitation to do your exercise your power in the process. So those really don't work. It's would you, will you really is necessary for to address our offense. Now, this may sound kind of like, okay, whoop-de-doo, great. Is it really going to be helpful? That I think it is essential to start the possibility of reconciliation, but in and of itself, doing this for any and all of the offenses we've done for other people or to other people that we haven't talked about is essential, and in and of itself builds trust. Right? I'm seeing you, I'm recognizing you, I'm valuing you. And in any relationship, that's what we desire of the other person to do for us. That they see us, they value us, they recognize the impact they have on us, both the positive and the negative. But we want to express positive to others and experience positive from others. That as we do that in any relationship, it builds trust. Right? That's another aspect. When you meet somebody, you trust them a little bit initially, probably, unless you have trust issues and maybe you don't at all, and it's a totally different topic. But any relationship, even just to start it, requires some level of trust. And then as we get to know each other, we trust each other more, we share more information, we share more personal information. Trust continues to build because the other person holds that responsibility honorably, safely, with care. And also, they share stuff with us, to being vulnerable with us, and we do the same. And then we continue to go deeper and deeper in our connection with the other person. Now, in a super broken relationship, kind of in the extreme affair kind of things with marriage or other offenses with individual people's siblings, and no, this does not guarantee reconciliation, but it does do our part or do your part to offer the opportunity for it, right? Because when we do something pretty severe, it doesn't go back to the low trust we started with. A lot of times it can go farther, it can go to negative trust or distrust. So now we're as we're doing the positive things, right? A negative plus a positive doesn't necessarily mean a positive. It may just mean less of a negative. So as we continue to build those things into the relationship, and I think it starts with that owning process, like I said earlier, we move the trust further up the scale. And initially we may just be hoping to get back to neutral, which is better than distrust for sure. So those are things I think are absolutely critical. Now, as a Christian, where's the parallel to this, just to give you a little bit more information on that or how I see it. The gospel message is about forgiveness. And we say God already forgave us in Christ. Absolutely. But that's not going to get us to heaven, right? It's for us who believe on him and receive his forgiveness, right? We acknowledge our need for it, acknowledge our offenses, our shortcomings, our failures, right? The brokenness in the relationship with God that occurred because of us. And we have to address the specifics. And I kind of think as you go to God and say, oh, just forgive me for anything I've ever done badly or poorly or that hurt you. It's kind of the same. If we did that in a human-human relationship, it would not earn any real care or trust or forgiveness. It would be too general. We have people, and God is very much detailed, and details are important. So it's important for us in our relationship with God to be about the details and to see, because I think go back to the thing you see, I ask God, forgive me for anything I ever done. If that's hurt you, I think he sometimes says or would say, well, what do you mean? Or what in particular are you talking about? As he wants to know. And at times we'll say, oh, I don't need to go into it, but I think he's really encouraging us to, because that's the important part. Not only for us to be humble and open to it, but also to be able to receive those specific things or forgiveness for those specific things. Right? We bring those out in the light. Out in the light, they lose their power, and they become insignificant, and then they get out of us, and the truth can come in, and we can receive it. So that is critical, and I think God wants the same, to get to own that we did it. It was wrong, right? It hurt our relationship with God. It hurt God. I think he grieves when we do things that are not right, that are damaging, even to other people or to him. Right, and we'll be genuinely sorrowful, and it'll bring tears, sadness. The weight of our impact will be felt and understood by us. And then, would you forgive me, God? Now, he's already done it in Christ, but it's our receiving of that forgiveness that we have to ask for it in order to get it. Right, stuff this doesn't show up typically unless we ask. And that is what happens in relationships: is we ask for things, and the other person has the opportunity to provide that should they choose. So that's kind of the Christian basis with our relationship with God, and we take that same deal, because if it works in a relationship with God, it'll work in every other relationship, to begin trust building. Now with God, he's already forgiven us. He wants to reconcile. He is there. He has already done his work. We have to receive it. Now, in human relationships, this doesn't guarantee reconciliation, because that other person still has to work through the forgiveness process or work to forgive, and they may or may not. I tell people, when you ask for forgiveness from another person, they don't have to say yes right away, because sometimes even if they'd say yes right away, they don't always mean it. It's not going to be that impactful. It's not going to be even authentic or true. So they will deceive themselves and deceive us too by not being honest. That you can say things like, well, I'm going to work to get there, or I will at some time in the future, or, well, I actually need to talk a little bit more about that, because there are some things in there that we need to really kind of understand, so I can really release you from that thing you did, that event, because maybe it hurt me more than you understand that it did. And that's fine. That's further conversation. That is great for relationships. And I was thinking one other thing, but so that person is not mandated to do it initially. Now, as Christians, we are, and we did it in that we left them off the hook and made your balance zero. But this is talking about a forgiveness that is very interpersonal. It is going back to that money thing. It is paying back. It is risking for me um, to own the hurt and to be responsible for addressing that pain. And just because it's the other part, just because I ask for forgiveness, and even if you give me the forgiveness of what I've done, the other person, bouncing back and forth, in you and me and I, with the forgiving party does not have to trust me if I'm the offending party. It doesn't have to trust me. This doesn't mandate trust. This just opens up the opportunity for trust to be rebuilt. And it does build some trust because there's a relief or a freeing that comes when you've owned that you've hurt me. I can let that part go, and I can feel cared for and recognized, to offer forgiveness. And like with the finance thing, it's not mandated to trust. I haven't proven myself trustworthy at all. That requires a whole other part of this process to fix a broken relationship or fix the damaged relationship. Is I have to do positive things to prove that I'm responsible. I'm going to care for you. I'm going to honor your heart, and I'm going to continue to own my responsibility as I go forward. Um, it is very hard to rebuild. I'm seeing some comments. Grace is needed to follow forgiveness. Yes, it is. Grace is needed to follow forgiveness, most definitely. Trust is hard to rebuild, especially when it's hard to give in the first place. Absolutely. A lot of times it's hard to give trust in the first place because we've been damaged in relationships before that. People have hurt us, disappointed us, failed us. Absolutely. So moving forward in other relationships, especially if the other person didn't own them, or we were made to be responsible, or tried to be responsible for it, or shamed, or whatever, we're going to take that data points, or those data points, and it is data, it is our experiences that say, hey, this is how relationships seem to go. So why would I trust this next person? Oh, sure, they may look trustworthy, or other people say they're trustworthy, but we haven't experienced it. And that personal data gathering is very important. And so, one of the things that's really required in this, and being able to give trust again, or to risk again, is to really go back and address the damage that those other people caused, and that we feel like we got robbed of power, we've given up power, and their hurt is all our fault, and we were powerless to do anything about it. Um, Rearranging that to, depending on the age in particular, but often we're set up for it. But when we're kids, that we are subject to the environment around us. So we are, unfortunately, if we will in some form or fashion, if we're hurt by the people around us and by the adults, we are definitely going to be confused about whose responsibility it is. And a lot of times as kids, we take on it as ours, and we see other people as untrustworthy. And that makes a lot of sense. That's the data points too. And I can talk about that. No, I will talk about that in another video, my boot camp illustration, and how I see that kind of playing out for our own personal training and the way we move forward in life. And that is incredibly important. So there you go. Just one more time through it. I did it. It was wrong. It hurt you. I'm sorry, or express sorrow. And would you or will you forgive me for that thing that I did? So hopefully it's helpful. I know this is a lot, and it's way more complicated than these 5 parts may seem. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot of hurt. Can be a large mountain of things. Totally get it. I'm there as well. And it is very, very hard to practice this for others, even in the smaller things. But I know this works because personally I do it and I've done it with my kids, with my wife, with my friends that I've hurt, where I had an opportunity to do that. But really, really, in particular, the important relationships in my life, my wife and my kids. And one more thing on this, while it just popped into my mind, moving forward, should the relationship begin reconciling and trust being built, when you address these events that you did, you address them to what you understand it to be, and the other person will forgive to the understanding they have. There may be things that are part of that offense that neither party is completely aware of, and they can and often seem to, at times, and maybe much smaller levels, it's the part that wasn't addressed, but it comes up in the future. There's a trigger, there's an event that sort of feels similar to that, and that historical event may come back up. It may be in not bringing the whole thing in the front, but going, oh goodness, that's a hurt I didn't recognize as in nooks and crannies of my heart, that offense back there hit as well, and both parties understand and accept that that can and very well might happen, and trust is continued to be built if that part is handled well, meaning the person who is hurt is able to express it and own it, not hide it, and the offending party holds it well too, doesn't say things like, oh, we already talked about that, or oh, you're bringing that up again, or oh goodness, you're never going to forgive me for that, oh my, we're going to carry this on for the rest of our relationship, goodness gracious, right? If that's not done, if the offending party's like, yeah, you're right, I did do that, I know we worked through a lot of it, and there's these other parts too, and I'm still sad, I'm sorry, yeah, yes, I did that. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, it hurt you in this now more discovered way of things. And yeah, I'm sorry for that. And then would you forgive me for that offense that hurt in this particular way? So there's a bit more. I know there's a whole lot more. I'd be glad with some comments, questions, further information. Want me to expand on this stuff, because it is a lot. We're complicated as people, and it can take a lot of effort and knowledge and insight and trial and error a lot of times, and experimenting and effort put forth that may or may not go well in order to solve these hurts and issues. What if the offending party refuses to acknowledge an offense? That is a different part of it. That's where we can forgive the other party, but reconciliation is not going to happen, meaning we're never going to be able to trust that person to the level we did before the offense. Unfortunately, that is the case, because we cannot control what the other person does. Right? We really long for the relationship to be restored. We long for it to be what it was before. But relationships requires the two parties to participate. And I say it this way: the depth of relationship is limited to the shallowest person. Kind of like the chain is as strong as its weakest link. This type of forgiveness that I'm discussing about, the reconciliation part, is when we're the offending party, we can do our job in this. And as the offended party, if somebody comes to us with this, we can do our part as I kind of laid out. But if the offending party does not acknowledge their offense, we now are forced to adjust the way we relate to them. They might not understand it. They might not validate it. Right? When they refuse, they're going to do whatever they do to get out of it, minimize it, just offload their responsibility. A lot of times they make it ours, which now just reduces trust even more, because not only are you not owning your offense, but you are blaming me, which is furtherly offensive. So what if the offending party refuses? You can't reconcile. You can forgive them, so you're not labored by it. Um, but to continue to hang around that person to the level or interact with that person to the level you were before, where the offense kind of occurred, is really unwise because the risk is now up. They're going to possibly do it again. Kind of like you borrow money, if you don't take responsibility to own that you didn't pay it back, well then I'm not going to lend you money again, or I'm not going to lend you the amount of money that I did before. Maybe I'll risk and uh, and give you a little bit. Right, exactly. This is, and it's the toughest part of this is the loss of the relationship that we have to address. It's a whole nother grieving process. It's a surrendering. It's a acknowledging disappointment and loss is, for lack of better description. We lose either the relationship completely or the level of connection we have. And some of the worst parts of this are in marriages and in the families we come from where parents and siblings don't own their offense. So now we have to adjust, unfortunately, how we may spend time with these people. That's like a holiday thing coming up and all that, where we feel obligated to go do it, but yet these people are hurtful, painful, scary, untrustworthy, unsafe, and often not pleasant to be around. But we feel the pressure that we're supposed to go hang out with them at that level where they hurt us. And the truth is, we don't have to. They're not going to understand it a lot of times. They're going to maybe think we're really weird or blame us for more. And yes, they very well might do that. And that's part of stuff to be prepared for too, which then you just put on the list of, yep, see, there's another reason why I'm not hanging out with you, because you just hurt me again and blamed me and lacked your responsibility for your part in this. So there you go. A whole lot, but I really felt it was important to talk about this. It's one of the critical parts of relationships and the very painful parts of when the other person does not own their offending behavior, and we are forced, forced not the correct word, we can either choose to continue to be in a relationship that way and be hurt, or let go of the relationship to whatever level and grieve the loss. But recognize we are way more valuable than this person or people may be treating us, and to walk as Christ made us and valued us. It is pretty much, to me, essential to walk in a way that shows how valuable I am. And princes and princesses do not tolerate poor treatment. They ask the person to leave or worse. So, love you all. Until next time, have a great day. And yes, know God loves you. Okay? Take care. Thanks for your comments. And I'll be seeing you next time. Bye.